Hello and welcome to Build What Lasts, a podcast of Catholic culture, skilled labor, and the intellectual life. I am Peter Tardif, a professor at San Damiano College for the Trades, where we try to explore the mutually enriching relationship between the liberal arts and the trades. Today I sat down with Kent Lesnowski to talk about Pope Leo XIV's new encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas. We covered topics such as the threats that AI causes to human dignity and especially to the dignity of work. I hope you enjoy the following conversation.
So practically speaking, what we're going to do is talk about exciting topics in this area, Peter and I, as good friends, but then we're also going to be bringing on, as guests, people who integrate this unity of need and love, of work that has to be done and things that are done for their own sake, people who integrate the liberal arts and the specific trades together in their own lives. We'll bring them on to share insights with us and help us figure out more deeply what these two ideas have to do with each other. Today, what we're going to start with is a conversation, or at least the first part of a conversation, on Pope Leo XIV's encyclical Magnifica Humanitas. Now, you're thinking, well, that's on AI, right? So I'm going to put a question to you, Peter, right away here. What does this encyclical even have to do with building things, let alone building things that last?
Yeah, well, Pope Leo begins and ends his encyclical on the note of drawing on the biblical images of the Tower of Babel and Jerusalem, and he says the aim for technology is not to build a Tower of Babel, but to rebuild Jerusalem from the ruins.
Okay, well, let me just... Okay, so we can affirm this, and we can try and get up close and personal to it and see what we think. So his analogy, if I'm understanding, is that, okay, look, if we're Catholics and we're living in an AI world, we're supposed to be Nehemiah. We're supposed to see some ruins around us, and we're supposed to try to build up Jerusalem responsibly, build up God's kingdom, anticipate the kingdom of God, right? And we can't simply push this stuff aside as if it's not going to be, as if it's not relevant or it's not something, we need to just totally reject it. He's saying you build it up in a way that serves the kingdom. Am I getting that? Is that what you think he's getting after there?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, but then the question is, how do you do that in a way that's not Babel?
Yeah.
It seems really a fine line to me between whether you're doing the Tower of Babel and whether you're rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem.
Yeah, well, that gets at one of the important principles of his essay, or the encyclical, which is that part of the threat that AI makes to us is that it tries to surpass human limitations. In that way, it really does risk being a false god, which I think he hints at in the encyclical, because he mentions explicitly that, as Christians, we are called to transcend our nature, right?
Yeah.
But that's through a relationship with God. So any attempt to transcend our nature without God is a kind of idol building. Right?
Okay, so the Babel element of this is we're sitting here as finite creatures who are ignorant, who are going to die, and their bodies break down, and we get slower as we age, and all of this stuff, right? And we get sick. And we're upset with those limitations. We want to get past them. And then the question is, are you saying there's a way to get past them that's Babelish, and there's a way to get past them that's Nehemiah-ish?
Right, yeah.
Okay. So then, if we're getting past them Babel in the Babel way, is all AI use and development and part of a technological attempt to get past those limitations in an idolistic way? Or how do we make the distinction between whether we're doing it as Babel or whether we're doing it as part of what we've hypothesized and Pope Leo hypothesized as a Christian way of going about this effort, or this dissatisfaction with our limits, right? We're supposed to be dissatisfied with them. So how do we do this in the right way?
Well, that's a really hard question. Maybe partially because it's
it's a very practical question, and I didn't find that much practical advice in the encyclical.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think there's a wisdom to getting too far into the weeds on practical advice, right, for a papal encyclical, right? They have to stay in a certain way at the level of principle and stay at the level that the Pope can be sure that what he's saying is completely in line with the permanent tradition of the Church and not sort of creating some ad hoc thing that might be wrong tomorrow, right? Because it's a precise application of a principle. So, okay, well then let's brainstorm that for a second. So, if we're trying to get past human limitations with AI, the limitations that we're getting past there are like memory, right? I can only remember so much. Skills, I only know how to do a certain amount of computer programming, and an AI maybe knows better than I do how to do that. Or I don't know how to solve a math problem, so it can help me with that.
Right.
I don't know where everything is in a text. I don't know how to fix my car the right way. So it's like helping me get past my limits of ignorance.
Yeah, and also limits of time. Right? I just don't have time to search through this text and find all these references.
Mm-hmm.
So just ask.
Okay, so then that seems like it's a value add.
Yeah.
So where's the risk there? How is this? What's so babblish about just trying to save time and expand the amount of things I know or the amount of information I have access to?
Yeah, well, Leo identifies one of the threats as this excessive easiness. He says, we grow personally through putting effort into the pursuit of wisdom. Right? He references Plato for that.
Yes, no, I remember he talks about where Plato says that learning is like striking the flint and steel, right, to get the spark that lights the truth up in your soul, or something to that effect, right? And so if we're using AI for everything to learn more knowledge to help us with our limitation of ignorance, we are shortcutting and actually de-skilling ourselves in the ability to learn anything at all, because according to what Plato said, learning takes time, learning takes effort, learning takes patience.
Right, yeah.
It's the enkindling of something in your soul more than it is simply the perception of something in your brain, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so one threat that Pope Leo identifies, just so I'm making sure I get this, is that if we use AI too much, we're actually destroying our ability to learn in a meaningful way.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. Well, what else? Let's see here. What else is a problem? Are there other problems? Are there other babble threats?
Yeah, well, it has to do partially with what is being placed as the highest value. And part of his argument is that in the age of technology, the thing that starts to take front and center is efficiency and profit. So if that becomes the idol, what everything is aiming at,
okay,
be Babylonian.
Yeah. Okay, so we could be saying, look, the reason I'm using AI is so that I can get 10 times more work done than I could in the past.
Right.
And if that efficiency is the key criterion of the use, it will overwhelm the other criteria that really ought to be more important, like, for example, does using this serve my ends, my highest ends as a human?
Right.
Namely, the permanent, transcendent ends of my soul, not merely the temporal ends of accomplishing more work.
Right.
Okay.
Which carries us to another question, Nick, what we were talking about before, that he briefly touched on, but I wish he had said more about this question of, well, why can't you just moralize AI?
Yes.
Like, why can't you just program good values into it? Which I think people have attempted to do to some extent. They've attempted to create Catholic.
Right, and this is where I want. Are those people doing the Nehemiah thing? Right? Are they rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem by saying, well, we're going to create an AI system that if you ask it a question, it'll only go from Catholic data sets,
right,
or it will only tell you an answer that fits with a Catholic moral vision, right? Okay, so if we do that, let's say we accomplish that perfectly.
Yeah.
We've created a morally good AI first of all, I guess, would that ever be possible? And then B, if we accomplish that, have we actually saved ourselves from the problems of AI?
Yeah, well, a problem we wouldn't have saved ourselves from, if there's a twofold problem with AI. One is that the people programming it have questionable morals, right? But the other is that it presents a false reality by simulating human intelligence, even though it isn't human intelligence.
Okay.
So,
yep.
The person who's learning what the church teaches through some Catholic AI, that might be helpful, but also learning is supposed to be done in community, right? And your teachers are supposed to be people who love your souls, right? As Socrates tells Alcibiades. So is there a problem with kind of offloading work that should be done by humans onto a computer program? And also for the learners, is there a problem with almost experiencing something that's like a human interaction, but that isn't?
Okay, so even if you had a morally good AI, a difficulty there, or a risk or a threat there, is that I'm going to think and act as if I'm engaging with a real intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? And it would be very hard for me to continually hedge that or insulate myself from the fact that it's not actually a human intelligence, right? So if I'm talking to an AI Thomas Aquinas bot, right?
Yeah.
And I'm having a conversation with this AI Thomas Aquinas bot, the threat there, if I understand, is that we are supposed to be learning from those who care about our souls. That the sort of educational exchange of a teacher and a student is really about love and bringing the student to share in the truth and goodness that the teacher loves, and to help that student, I guess, give birth to knowledge, right? And the teacher helps midwife them into that, right? But those are all like human activities, right? That are essentially human because they're about shared love for a common good and inviting someone else into that good. The Thomas Aquinas bot, as much as it will give me truth, doesn't actually care for my soul. Right. Doesn't actually love me. And is not really inviting me into something it loves in that sense. So really it's a sort of, again, a simulation of an educational experience.
Right.
Which isn't real. And then so the threat is that we think it's real. Okay, so what's bad? Let me tease this out. What's bad about me thinking that it was a real, so to speak, educational experience, that it was a real conversation? What's so bad about that?
Well, Pope actually says very strikingly that it could kill your desire for human interaction. Because
strong statement from the Pope. Okay.
Because if you're always talking to a robot who doesn't have human flaws, right, who doesn't make mistakes or say things in obscure ways sometimes, and then you'll just get used to that level of, in other words, if you can get this from a computer, then why would you deal with imperfect people? Right?
Hey, that is really interesting. So it's similar to what he was saying earlier about it actually dulls the human's ability to do the real work of learning, right? Which it takes patience to kind of actually bring to light a fire in your soul around some knowledge. That takes work. In the same way, dealing with real people takes work. Real relationships take work precisely because of what you were saying. Yeah, the flaws and faults and slowness and inept explanations of things. Yeah. So essentially, the use of AI cuts down our patience. Yeah. And it contributes to something else that Pope Leo said in the encyclical, which is one of the real threats of this is a culture of immediacy.
Yeah.
Is that right? That we I've got a little note here. He says, we don't want to create a culture of immediacy with hyperstimulation, which gives rise, ironically, to fatigue, boredom, and apathy concerning the effort required for seeking the truth.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I think that goes to learning anything, but also relationships, right? If I get bored with you,
yeah,
that's going to be a problem in our conversation. So, okay, so we've got some threats there. What about if I go around functionally acting as if my conversations with an AI bot are real conversations? I think there's also going to be some kind of internal effect that has on me, actually, in the way I perceive myself. What do you think?
Well, to some extent, yeah, maybe if you become like the people who are around you naturally, and you start to see the AI as a person, because in a lot of ways it acts like a person, then the internal effect would be that you start to become more like it, right? And you start to see yourself more as that kind of being,
Okay.
right?
So I think Pope Leo says that the more we would engage with AI, there's a risk that we would come to think of ourselves too as programs to be optimized, or some just that we, just like everything else is about optimization and profit maxing and efficiency maxing, we're just like that too. And the way our minds work is essentially the same way that a large language model works, right?
Right. Yeah.
Recovering stuff from a data bank and reorganizing it and then kind of launching it out, right? And so if we have a false anthropology or a wrong understanding of human nature, that's going to come back to bite us because that'll affect our consciences and our morality as a culture and as human individuals, right? So I think that's where Pope Leo is going with that. Now, let me play the other side for a second, right? Books are technology.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I could pick up the Summa, right? It's just sitting over there on the shelf. I could pick up the Summa and read the words of St. Thomas Aquinas. And it would seem to me as if I'm actually having a conversation with my friend who can hear us right now, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
Now, how is that exchange between me and the saint through his book meaningfully different from an exchange I have between me and the saint through the AI bot, right? The Thomas Aquinas bot. Is there a meaningful difference, do you think? Or is it really just similar?
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind is the words are written by a real person, whereas in artificial intelligence, they're not. So there isn't as much of a lie or a potential lie there, right? Because you actually can be friends with St. Thomas Aquinas. And even authors who aren't in heaven, there's a sense of friendship you can have with them because, they're giving something to you, and you're, in a way, giving something to them by making whatever they wrote come alive in you, right? So there can be a mutual friendship. But with AI, of course, there isn't a person on the other side of those words.
Okay, because it's not that I'm just reading his text. I'm reading some recombination of those texts. And there was an agent, for lack of a better word, that recombined those texts and presented them to me. So it's not... Because, on the one hand, you could say, well, I'm still interacting with Thomas Aquinas because everything that's going to be represented to me is either exactly what he said or would be a paraphrase of what he said or an application of what he said to a contemporary idea.
Yeah.
Right? So in a certain way, it's his, but because there's that middleman, and here I am anthropomorphizing AI, this is not good. There's a middle thing that's a kind of agent reorganizing St. Thomas Aquinas' actual words.
Yeah.
I'm no longer interacting directly with Thomas Aquinas in the way I was if I just read his book.
Right, yeah. Even though it would be better getting Aquinas' opinion secondhand through AI, it would probably be better than a lot of other things you might get through AI. Like, there's more of a interaction with a person there.
Yeah, it really is. And let me just pose this one too. Let's say, and maybe this goes back to the same thing we said before, so I'm open to that, but let's say this AI Aquinas bot knows Thomas Aquinas' texts, again, wrong use of words, somehow has access to all of that data in a way that's more accurate than any human person.
Right, yeah.
And expresses it more winsomely than any human person could when you asked a question.
Yeah.
More quickly than any person could when you asked them a question. Man, if that's true, why would I not talk to the Aquinas bot?
Yeah. Although I will say, and this is a quibble, doesn't really alter your main point, but that I don't believe that artificial intelligence will ever master wit, because I think what we love so much about wit is that it is always something more than is expected. Like everything that's truly witty is something above the status quo, right? And AI just lives at the status quo by definition. So hopefully there's some hope there.
So you could program this bot to it could be throw in a joke with everything, but the joke would be, it wouldn't have the soul of wit, probably. It would be, here's a pre-programmed joke about something about religion. Can you get AI to have a sense of humor, right? In a meaningful, modern way? That would be something that is worth thinking about. Okay, so another reason that we said before already about why you would rather talk to a person than the Aquinas bot would be because there's an actual exchange of love and real friendship between two persons, even if that person doesn't know Aquinas as well as the bot having access to all of that data. It might, I'm asking a question. Is it worth having a potentially worse outcome of my own knowledge of what Aquinas means, even if, because I'm valuing talking to an actual person about Aquinas, or I'm valuing talking to Aquinas himself through reading his text. So I might actually end up knowing less about Aquinas and what he thinks if I read his text or I talk to you about it. But I'm saying that somehow the manner of learning it is so important that I'm actually willing to take the risk of not knowing as much.
Because when it comes to education, it's not about filling a bucket. It isn't primarily about the amount of things you know. Right? That how you know them matters, and that's pretty clear just from experience. Like my experience of, I'm teaching Aristotle's logic for the first time, and as I'm reading it, all of my old teachers are in my head.
For better and worse.
For better or worse. Talking to me. But there's something about reading the first line of the posterior analytics. When I read that again for the first time, it took me back to my freshman year. Those truths of Aristotle got into me more deeply in a way that lasts because of the people who embodied them.
So speaking of learning and truth, Pope Leo, I'm not sure if this is what he thinks is the major threat of AI, but he definitely raises the flag on this one with red caution, serious caution. He thinks AI can be a threat to truth itself. And you and I have been talking about how it's a threat to our ability to encounter and engage and learn truth in a truly human way, and the effort it takes. But Pope Leo even backs up beyond that and says, well, wait a minute, truth itself is at stake. And what do we think about that? Is where? How?
Well, that gets back to the Tower of Babel, that he says if the more certain people have control over what other people think, right, the more those people will start thinking that they can determine truth themselves, right? And so it's this building of reality by yourself.
Okay, and so that makes sense. And I think he's also saying when the data that gets represented back to you when you ask a question is monetized, right? And it's made the subject of advertising content, so to speak. So if I can get my content in front of a chatbot user by paying the guy who wrote the program a little extra money, then all of a sudden that value to the business can start overwhelming me getting a true response to my question versus me getting a response that was paid for, right, by somebody. And that will certainly threaten the connection between AI and truth as well, from just a practical standpoint, right? You got the philosophic. I think that's a great philosophic answer, and I know that Pope Leo goes there, and I think he's also very concerned about the way that unethical business use, right? Not to say there isn't ethical business use, but unethical, immoral use of AI, once it gets monetized, is a risk to truth as well. And I think the other thing he mentioned is just the way that it can be used to control social control, right? So that the access we all have to it universalizes can kind of universalize human experience. So then, and universalize human culture and imagination because we're all seeing the same things, right?
Yeah.
So then the threat becomes whoever's in charge of what it is we see or what it is we read or hear when we are engaging with the AI, that person determines the way we perceive everything, right? The way we perceive truth itself, goodness, beauty, what products to buy, what singers to love, all of what sports to watch, everything. So there's a risk there of putting too much control in the hands of a few who determine our cultural imagination, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to also think about what the relationship is between AI and work,
Yeah.
both white-collar work and the kind of work of the trades. This is a whole subject beyond what we've been talking about already. So how is this relevant to a school like ours? We already see it's relevant to the very essence of what it means to learn, right? But how is it relevant to a school like ours, which is really engaged in this project of not only learning liberal arts, but also things with our hands, the true work of the hands?
Yeah, well, something I hope that the encyclical is hopefully mentioning AI gives you kind of an appearance instead of a reality, which is difficult to say exactly what he means by this, but I've been thinking in terms of, Aristotle, his realism and his doctrine that we somehow understand universal truths through sense experience. And if we're trying to skip that and just going to a computer to give us these truths, right, then we've missed out on knowing like humans know and are meant to know, right? But
interesting. So it's like we're trying to imitate a kind of angelic knowing,
yeah,
or some sort of direct infusion of knowledge into our minds without learning and knowing the way humans come to know, which is through abstracting from things that we've learned through our senses.
Right.
And if we never touch a hammer and a piece of wood and see how the grain flows and all have that tactile experience, it just trying to learn it from AI.
Right, yeah.
It's short-circuiting what it means to be a human.
Yeah, right.
Interesting. Okay. So that's one thing. A lot of people talk about the trades and skilled trades and work of the hands as sort of AI proof. And I wonder if that's true. So let me just pose a couple questions. Let's say I'm out in the shop, St. Joseph's Carpenter shop out there, St. Lucy's electrical shop, and I don't know how to do something.
Yeah.
Hey, AI, how do I wire this box? Right? I'm going to get an answer back. Does that matter? Should we do that in the shop? Should we be using AI?
Yeah. Being able to ask AI means that you won't ask a person. So it attached to our previous conversation.
Okay, so that's basically the same question there. Okay, so how we use AI not only to teach and learn in the liberal arts sense, but to teach and learn in the trade sense, we would still be wanting to say, hey, no, there's something better about just learning from another person.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Because there's a real traditioning of from one person to another, handing on of something, right, that happens when you're person to person, right? That's simulated with an AI learning, but isn't real. Okay, fine. Got that. But what about, do we think, is it just a matter of time before robotics catches up enough to, I don't know, build a house or fix your plumbing, if that were to break down? And if so, what do we do then?
Yeah, that would be one of the longer-term threats Poplio identifies, because he says, work is part of human nature, it's part of how we flourish. And if AI takes that away from us, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah, let me ask the question a different way, right? Some people talk about a sort of utopia where humanity no longer has to do physical labor. No one has to be a farmer. No one has to be a carpenter. No one has to fill in the blank, right? And so we're left with a humanity that has all day, every day to work on hobbies.
Yeah.
Or art, or music, or whatever. But whatever it is they're doing, they don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Is that actually a utopia? If AI could provide that for us, is that really a utopia?
Yeah, that one I go back and forth on because part of me says that maybe in some ways, if I didn't have to worry about feeding myself, or if no one did really, and we could just read great books and talk about them, maybe we could work on art. We could address other kinds needs other than material needs, right? Because we do need to need something, right, to be motivated. Right? Is need such a bad thing when it comes to teaching you about reality? Is a farmer who doesn't need his farm in order to survive, is he really going to learn as much or be as much part of the land? Robert Frost says, in some ways, if you want the land to belong to you, you have to belong to it, right? Which means you have to actually expend yourself on it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so let me see about jumping into that, because I just think if we were to come to a world where everything were a hobby, and you didn't need to do anything. So, Pope Benedict XVI, I think, attempts for a moment in his encyclical Spe Salvi to imagine such a world. And he says that even if you created a world of perfect justice, so to speak, people would always need love. They would always need works of mercy. Because things would happen, right? They would fall in hard times. They would still have sicknesses or loneliness or things like, so love is something that would always be needed, and you couldn't, even no matter how good the AI is, you could never create a scenario where humans don't need, in fact, to be loved and love each other. So I think even if you were to say, well, no one has to farm, no one has to fix their plumbing, no one has to build a house, somehow you have to love each other and be loved. Because AI cannot do that. It is not a loving, free, self-giving being, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool, but then it's like, yay, we've stated, okay, wow, but seriously, how would you then instantiate that love? If all of the physical stuff, right, is done by an AI and robotics, what does it mean to say, well, I have to go love that person?
Yeah, right.
Because they don't need anything physical from me. They don't even need me to do a work of mercy for them. They don't need me to teach them even. Not a spiritual work of mercy. Not a corporal work of mercy.
Yeah, well, they need to be friends with them, right? Because the friendship they have with their AI chatbots just isn't fulfilling them. But,
yeah, hopefully it's not, right? And it never could. But then, okay, so I think Pope Leo, in his encyclical where he says a threat of consistent AI use is that, again, you won't want to hang out with people.
Yeah, right.
Is that if we imagine this utopia world, I think in this utopia world, the AI would have become so good, so powerful, that people will have stopped interacting with each other. Unless somehow the AI is understands, for lack of a better phrase, that in order to keep humans from killing themselves, it can't be so convincingly human. It has to somehow let people realize, no, they still need to be friends with each other.
Yeah. If the AI starts turning itself off at a certain point,
yeah.
it realizes it's killing people.
Right. So if you ask AI a question, what would be its best response? Maybe that best response would be, go ask your parents about this, right? Or go ask your friend about it. Don't talk to me anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm going to plant myself firmly on the side that says a world with just hobbies is a nightmare.
Yeah.
A total nightmare. Because I think what it would do is present ourselves with a lie. Because, we say, well, no, because our spiritual needs are always going to be still unfulfilled. And that's true. But we are such lame, busted, blind, disordered creatures that we don't even see the fact that we have spiritual needs very well unless our physical needs are also front and center, I think.
I see.
Right? And so the fact that I'm physically hungry reminds me not only that I'm a physical being, but that I'm a spiritual one. Where we talk about, think back to Lent. Why do I fast? Well, it's not just because being hungry makes me holy. In fact, it doesn't make me holy. It's because somehow when I'm physically hungry, I'm reminded that, oh, you know what? I don't have everything I need. And part of what I need is to be in relationship with God, to do the will of God as my bread. Right? So I'm thinking that if we lived in a world where we never had need, it would also destroy our true access to spiritual fulfillment too. And I'm wondering if Robert Frost thinks that with this poem that you mentioned on the front side of our conversation.
Yeah.
Is he saying that there needs to be a union between things you do out of need and things you do for their own sake?
Yeah. And at the same time, a union between things you do for present need and for the sake of heaven.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah. Which, speaking of heaven, as our final end and destination, is a good place for us to end this conversation today, which has been really fun. And I'm looking forward to our next installment of Build What Lasts. Yeah, thanks for getting us started, Peter, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more fun to come.
yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.